Good morning. We'll go ahead and get started. Thank you for attending this session. This session is term setup and creation, helpful tools that exceed baseline functionality. Our presenter this morning is Daniel Strickland from the University of Alabama.
All right, good morning, everyone. Thanks for taking the time to attend the virtual session. This term setup, I think, is an important topic that might not have been discussed a lot at past conferences that I've been to. I've been to some sessions that have talked about end of term processing, what you do when you get to the end of the term, which is certainly very important. And I thought it might be good to maybe talk about what we do at the University of Alabama when we go to build our term. Why it's important, the steps that go into it, and to talk about some of the tools that we use to help make that process successful. So just as an introduction, and I hope you all can see this. If not, someone just let me know. I can put it in slideshow mode to make it a little bit larger. Can y'all see that okay? So we'll talk about the importance of the term creation process within the SIS and how UA utilizes technical applications to facilitate this essential function. We'll talk about our timelines, how we calculate our important dates, go over some of the important forms that we use to set up our term. We'll talk about the term roll process, copying terms forward from like term to like term, why it's a good thing, but what are the limitations that surround that process, at least within Banner. Talk about some of the applications we use to assist with this process and make it better and more successful. And hopefully we'll have some time at the end to talk about your own practices and answer some questions. So as I'm sure most of you all know who are familiar with building terms or want to learn more, it does require attention to detail and accuracy. A lot can go wrong when you're building a new term. We perform it well in advance of registration for the term in question. It drives the class schedule, course registration, billing, certification, and institutional reporting, and can be very, very, very bad if we do not set it up correctly, as I'm sure you all know. So in Alabama, we had almost 38,000 students enrolled this past fall semester, and just over 7,600 active class sections. We are a Banner institution. We follow what I would consider to be a decentralized class scheduling model. Our office, we're charged with administering course leave class and Ad Astra for scheduling. We certainly roll the term and we resolve reports that display errors. But the colleges and departments themselves are responsible for building class sections, editing the schedule according to our timelines. We use Argos for our institutional reporting. We do follow the standard semester system. We have a fall, spring, and summer term. We have parts of term within each. So for fall and spring, we have a 10-week mini session for both. We have a winter interim and a summer interim, and those span about 3 weeks. And during the summer, of course, we have multiple parts of term. We have a first part of term, a last part of term, and we have a law school that kind of has their own parts of term. So we build, roll, and start registration for summer and fall together at the same time. So when we come back from Christmas break, typically, that's when we'll build the upcoming summer and fall terms, and we'll roll the schedule in early January. We give departments a few weeks to edit their schedule before our deadline, and we try to publish the class schedule for summer and fall sometime around mid-February. And that gives students and their advisors time to look at the schedule and plan accordingly, and we usually begin registration for summer and fall in late March. For the spring term, we build that term and roll the schedule in early July each year. We publish the class schedule around mid-September, and registration for spring starts in late October. Sorry. We roll like term to like term, as I said earlier. So that typically means fall to fall, spring to spring, et cetera. And I'll certainly talk more about term roll here in a few minutes. So in Alabama, we start by trying to figure out what our important the dates are that will drive setting up the term. And to do this, we use a couple of spreadsheets that we think are helpful. This first one, the academic calendar comparison spreadsheet, we use that to work with academic affairs a couple of years in advance of the terms that we're about to create for an academic year. We have a part of term calculation spreadsheet that helps us identify our important billing dates and registration dates and deadlines within the term. So our add drop cutoff, our deadline to withdraw from the term and from courses within the term. And we use that spreadsheet also to let us know what RSTS and ESTS dates to key into Banner in advance of registration. So if I could, let me try to just kind of show you what these look like. And I don't want to spend too much time on them, and I'm certainly happy to share for those that might want to see this, but this is just an Excel spreadsheet that we use to create and formulate the upcoming academic year. And we compare our dates for that year based on what we've done in the past. And we calculate the number of days from the start of the term to the end of the term to make sure that we're in alignment with what we've done in the past. And we have rules for determining when terms should start, when various important dates of the term should be. For us at UA, a couple of really important dates are: one, when is spring commencement? Because if we know when spring commencement is, we know when spring has to start, and we know when summer has to start. So for us, spring commencement is typically the first Saturday after the first Friday in May. And if we know that, we know when we can begin the spring term. And we also know when the summer term can start. The summer term starts the Monday after spring commencement. So those are important drivers of our calendar. And also, the first day of classes in the fall is typically the third Wednesday of August, but sometimes it's the fourth Wednesday. It just depends on where it falls. So if we know when that is, we know how long fall will be. And so all of that to say, this is very handy in comparing what we've done to past terms and trying to formulate future dates. So as I said, this is our academic calendar comparison spreadsheet. This is our part of term calculation spreadsheet. So once we have an approved calendar for a particular year, we can come here, we can key in our start and end dates, and also our start and end dates for each part of term. And we can calculate when our add drop cutoffs will be for each part of term, when our deadline to withdraw from each part of term will be. And we do this for summer, fall, and spring. And then for fall, for example, those dates are carried forward to this tab of the spreadsheet, and they'll tell us what we should enter for start and end dates on the various forms that govern registration. So for those of you that are Banner users, this would be our ESTS dates here, followed by our RSTS dates for each part of term. So again, I'm happy to share this with you. Each institution is different. Certainly what works for us might not exactly work for you. Having these spreadsheets are very helpful for us. So back to my PowerPoint here. Sorry about that. First thing we do when we are going to build a term is enter start and end dates on our term validation table, STV term. We typically do this years in advance for catalog, cohort, financial aid, and reporting purposes. Sometimes these are our best guess, just depending on how far advanced we have to build these. Now on STV term, our end date is usually the last day of final exams. And I say that because at some institutions, that's the end date that you use for classes and so a term. But we certainly use the last day of exams when we're populating STV term. And here's a screenshot of that form at UA. And this is built out 4 or 5 years in advance. Those of you that are Banner users, I'm sure familiar with this form. But this is where you have to start. So once we have that and we're ready to start the process of building the term, we go into SOA term, which is our term control form. This is one of the most powerful forms in all of Banner, at least from my vantage point. We in the registrar's office, along with student account services, have access to update this form. When we go in advance of rolling the term, we set our CRN starting sequence number as the lowest value active CRN for the previous like term, which is very important. Those have to be in alignment for term roll to work. Some options that we set at UA, we allow in progress courses to satisfy prerequisites for future terms. So if we're in the middle of spring and students are registering for summer and fall, we assume that any courses that they're registered for the spring term or for the current term, the student's going to pass. So we assume that to allow them to register for courses in summer and fall for which they might currently be enrolled in the prerequisite. We do not include future terms for repeat processing. The readmit term that we have is set to the previous like term at UA. If the student sits out 3 consecutive semesters, they have to be readmitted, but I'm sure that's different at each institution. And as far as errors go for registration, we set them all to fatal except for repeat hours. We don't stop a student from taking a course again, but that's the only option that we have that governs registration errors for which we set to fatal. Some other options short term to talk about. We allow students to change the number of credit hours for variable hour courses, but they cannot change the course level or the grade mode. So if you have a course that has a pass-fail grade mode and a standard grade mode, our system defaults to the one that is set as the default. Students can't change that. We allow faculty and advisors to view the class schedule, to view class lists, and to grant permits and overrides, but we do not allow them to adjust student schedules. That is done solely by the students themselves. Our end dates and SOA term for each part of term align with the last day of classes, not counting finals. So that's the key difference in SOA term end dates compared to STV term. And I think that's different at each institution, but at UA, we use last day of classes, excluding finals, for that end date. Also within SOA term, we set our web registration start date approximately 3 weeks prior to the opening of registration so students can view their registration information when they go into self-service banner. So having this start date set well in advance of registration allows a student to see what their assigned registration time is, to see if they've been cleared by their advisor, see if they have any holds, and to check their academic standing, which we certainly find this useful. If that start date is not set in advance, students cannot see this. So just a screenshot quickly of SOA term. Again, those of you who are familiar with it know what it's about. These are just this is kind of a snapshot of the options that we set on the default screen, which I talked about earlier. Again, we set all of our registration errors to fatal except for this repeat hours. Here, everything else is listed as fatal. Again, faculty and advisors can look at the class schedule, look at class lists, grant permits, but they cannot adjust student registration. And again, our end dates for each part of term are set to the last day of classes, excluding finals. And this web registration start date, if you set it in advance, allows a student to view their registration status. There's another form that's kind of in the background that has to be populated for the term that you're planning to build, so that your LMS can import section data and there aren't any issues with Blackboard or Canvas, whatever you use at your institution. GOR ICCR is the banner form that facilitates this, and it has to be coded as active before you can have integration with your LMS. Okay, the term roll process itself, banner, it's the banner process is SSRROLL, SACRAO, and it's used to copy class sections from one prior term to a future term. At UA, and I'm sure as most of you do that run this at your institution, we copy like term to like term, fall to fall, spring to spring, summer to summer. And it prevents having to reinvent the wheel each term. If you're a large institution and you have thousands of class sections, having this job run is handy because you're not having to start from scratch. Now, certainly what you copy forward will have to be updated for the future term, but it's much easier to start with a template than it is to start with nothing. If your institution uses open learning sections, and I hope you don't, but if you do, you have to populate your start and end dates and your rules in form SOAORUL prior to term roll. At Alabama, we have a very, very, very small population of class sections that have open learning functionality, where basically your start and end dates can float depending on when the student starts the section. You know, again, I hope you don't use it, but if you do, just know you have to populate the rules on this form in order to use open learning sections. Most of the term roll parameters are customizable based on your preference. Some of our key preferences are as follows. We roll forward our section meeting times, our links, and our fees. We do not roll forward instructor information, cross listings, and in the CRN number. We roll forward course attributes, prerequisites, and restrictions at the catalog level. The exception to that are campus restrictions. At UA, those are set basically at the section level, because students are admitted into different campuses. You might have a class section that is restricted to students on main campus. You might have a section that is restricted to distance learners, a section that's restricted to our Gadsden campus. So that's really the only restriction that we copy from section to section, as opposed to copying from the catalog level. But again, I mean, that can be changed at each institution. Now, there are some limitations with the baseline job that rolls these forward, which I'll spend the next few minutes talking about. The term roll process will roll forward any active section regardless if the student registered for it in the prior term. Also, if you have a class section where the section title was changed from the catalog title, that job will roll forward the section title as opposed to the approved catalog title. And unfortunately, there's no option that the term roll process gives you for that. And then also, we've run into an issue that we call duplicate meeting patterns, where if you have a section that has multiple meeting patterns, when you run that term roll process, it resets the start and end dates for the multiple patterns to the start and end dates for the semester itself, when typically that's not the case. And I will spend some time here in the next few minutes talking about what that is in more detail. But first, the first problem that we try to address before a term roll is to go in and cancel sections that did not have any enrollment. So we at UA have been using banners since fall of 2005. And over time, if a class section is not canceled, it's just copied forward, even if it doesn't have enrollment. And over a number of years, that can result in a lot of clutter that is added to each term roll, which we found. So we built an AppWorks job that basically, right before we roll the prior term, it goes in and it looks for sections that had no enrollment and also had no entries on the registration table. So in order for a section to be canceled, no student could have had to try to sign up for it. So it has to meet those two criteria. And we first ran this job back in fall of 2017, and it reduced the number of sections we copied forward by about a third, which is a lot for us. Here's just a quick view of the code that we use for this job. And it basically is looking for any active section from the prior term where there was no enrollment and there were no entries in the audit table. I'm happy to share this with you if you'd like to see it. And if you look at the results from having run this over the past number of terms, the number of sections that it's canceling is declining, but that's to be expected since this was the first time that we had run it for both fall and spring back in 2017, 2018. But it still is helpful in cutting back on the number of sections that you're rolling in total. All right, the second problem that we've run into that we've addressed, which really drives me up the wall, is when you have section titles copied forward that differ from the approved catalog title. So as an example, let's say you have a history course that's been approved as special topics in history. But the history department has updated SACRAO so that they're calling it History of Poland, which is understandable for a given term. Certainly the content of that course can change since it is special topics. But the problem is that if you roll that forward continuously, it sort of morphs into its own course. It doesn't go through the proper approval process for having a standalone course. So to fix this problem, we kind of cheated. We modded the term roll process, and it resulted in a very good decrease in the number of section titles that were rolled forward that differed from the approved catalog title. And so here is kind of a snippet of the mod that we inserted on that job, where instead of rolling the section title, we are rolling the approved course title. That's basically all that it does. The section title reset. And then the third problem I want to talk about here is, again, if you have a class section that has multiple meeting patterns, if, for example, the primary pattern, it meets on Tuesdays and Thursdays during the entire semester, but it might have a lab or an exam time that might, so let's say if it's the fall semester, you might have the first exam that meets on October the 1st, the second exam meets November the 14th, and so on and so forth. And those dates are specified on there and not the start and end dates of the term. But sometimes when you roll these sections forward, it will reset all of those patterns to the start and end date of the term itself, which results in duplicate patterns. So we built an Argos report that identifies these after we roll the term, and we have to manually go in for each section, which isn't too many, and just take out those multiple patterns. And this is what that report looks like. It's showing you the section and the number of patterns that there are duplicate. And so it's, for us, it's a matter of going in and taking out the ones that are duplicates. And this just kind of gives you a visual example of what I'm talking about. So if this is the spring 2019 term, this particular section has an exam on the 20th of January, the 25th of February, and the 25th of March. If you roll it forward, it will reset these start dates to the start of the term and to the end of the term. So that's what we're trying to get rid of. Switching gears, we've also built a class schedule query dashboard in Argos that we found helpful, that is great for kind of spot checking section data. You can query sections by the subject, the course, the college department, the part of term, to the room it's assigned, by its schedule type, the number of enrollment. Just to give you a visual of what this looks like, I'm going to sign into Argos, our web version of Argos, just briefly. And this is our class schedule query. So we start by selecting a term. We can select any subject, any number. We can look at all the active sections by college, by department. Sometimes it takes a minute to load. And it's just a really handy tool to have, just to give you, it's like an all-purpose query for any sections you might want to look at. Quite handy to have. Let's see, let me get back here. Sorry, everyone. Covered a lot of ground quickly. So once we've rolled the term, and we're all ready to go, we coordinate with Leapfrog to make sure we can load those class sections into Course Leap Class, which is our front-end application whereby colleges and departments update the class schedule. We add these new terms as options for class schedule reports generated through Argos via our self-service portal that faculty and advisors have access to view. We communicate this information to the schedulers within each department, letting them know that we've completed the term, that they can run these reports and of the deadlines that we have in place for the class schedule. And we make sure that we look at our procedures and make sure that they're working properly and revise them as needed. So I know I've covered a lot quickly. I'm happy to share this with whoever, as well as the spreadsheets. Are there any questions you might have? Don't be shy.
Hi, Daniel. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
My name is Tracy, and I'm with Murray State University. We are a banner school also, and mine is a possible two-part question. The first of being, do your CRNs follow a pattern that matches the term? For example, are all of your spring term courses, do they begin with the number 1, and fall term courses begin with the number 8? Do y'all follow any such pattern?
Yes, that's a good question. Yes, we do. Our CRNs for spring start with 1, for summer 3, and for fall 4. And we do that to align with the actual term code. So at Alabama, spring of 2021 is 2021-10. Summer is 2021-30, and fall is 2021-40. So yes, we do try to have our CRNs align with those term digits.
We do as well. Do you find that you have any issues with the threat of running out of available CRNs since you've been live since 2005?
No.
Curious about that.
No, because those fall within a specific term. They don't, and I hope I understand your question correctly. Since they fall within a specific term, it's just a matter of creating a one-up number. It's like if you go in and build a new section, what should be happening in Banner is just, you know, the CRN should just default to the next number in that sequence. And I said, now it's in Banner, it's a 5-digit code. So I don't know what would happen if you got to 99999 and tried to build a new CRN. I don't know what would happen. I've never tried that. We've never run up against that at UA, but it's probably because our fall CRNs start with the number 4 as opposed to the number 8. So,
and at UAB, this is Cynthia at UAB. We use, it's term specific. So our spring starts with 30. So once we run out of all CRNs in the 30 range, it automatically goes to 40. But it doesn't matter. So that's not confusing because it's a 40 in the spring term because it's all tied to spring. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Okay. So we haven't run up against that either. But like Daniel said, I don't know what would happen if we get into the 90 range and we get it way up. But I don't think anybody offers that many classes in a given term. If you have that many, then there's a problem. You've got a lot of duplication in there somewhere.
any other questions?
Actually, hi, this is Laura from William & Mary. So you said that you do not use the same CRNs, like you don't copy them over, you reset them each term.
Yes.
But you're not running out. Like we find that we do duplicate our terms, our CRNs forward each time. And about every 7 years, we do have to reset and start back at the beginning. And so I just wondered how, if you weren't running into that, but you also weren't keeping the same CRNs. So I guess about how many classes do you guys have every term?
So as far as active sections, I think we have around 6,500 or so in the fall and spring. We don't use the same CRNs to avoid, I think, the scenario that you're talking about. If you roll the CRNs forward, then I don't have much experience with that, but I do think that there's the possibility that because if you have sections that were canceled in the previous term that you're copying forward, that it's skipping the CRNs of the canceled sections and it's creating gaps within your range of CRNs. And so if you keep doing that and doing that over time, I think you're running into the problem that you're describing. We don't think that students and advisors need to have the same CRN each time. Most advisors and students are looking at the course number and the section number. Not many students or advisors are looking at CRNs. So we kind of view them as something that's not as important to the public, but maybe more important for us. And I hope I'm understanding your
No, I
question
think that's
correctly.
exactly what we're doing. Like I was actually noting to a colleague that we do not cancel or remove or canceled sections, and I'm sure that's giving us a lot of extra CRNs. And actually it'd be great not to have the same CRNs, because what we find is that they start to rely on that, and then they'll say, oh, could you take that CRN and, you know, change the day and time. But if it's ever changed, then, you know, we don't have any reference. So
Right.
yeah, I think we're just
Right.
getting a bunch of duplicate sections that we don't, like extra sections we don't need out there.
Sure, and you know, something else about relying on the CRN to be the same over time. I mean, if you have a section that usually has enrollment that's important, but maybe you get to a particular term where for some reason it doesn't have enrollment, but you know in the future that it will. Well, if you cancel that section, that CRN is not going to roll forward. And so if you have students and faculty that are dependent on that specific CRN and it doesn't roll forward, then it might be assigned something else, and you might have to rebuild it. And Banner might let you use that CRM, but it might not. I'm not certain. So yes, I mean, I personally would recommend not copying them forward, but that's institutional preference. Any other questions?
How do we get a copy of your spreadsheet and the very robust Argos course report that y'all created?
Send $100 to the, I'm kidding. Just send me an email if you don't mind. If you can see my email address here, I'd be more than happy to share the spreadsheets with you and send you a PDF of this presentation.
And the
Daniel,
presentation will be posted to the SACRAO website as well.
Great.
Hey, I actually have a quick question. My name's Katie. I also work at William & Mary. And part of my position, which I'm new in it, working on year 2 right now, is to collect all of the term dates, start and end dates, pot dates, you know, build all the Estes Restus, all of that info. And I find that based on the way that we collect all of the information, dates are getting changed sort of midstream, which is okay as long as registration hasn't occurred. But I'm having to replicate that newly changed date in 6, 7, 8 places. How did you manage to boil it down? Did you always use this spreadsheet, or was this a process that sort of evolved over time because you were dealing with a lot of changed dates? I'm just curious how we can maybe push ourselves to doing something similar to what you did.
Well, I think a lot of that depends on the nature of your institution. You know, once our key dates on our academic calendar are approved by academic affairs and published, you know, from that point we can take those dates and we can calculate what our add drop cutoffs and our regular withdrawal cutoffs will be. Once we calculate them, then they're set. I mean, they're based on a formula. It's not like you know, it goes to a committee and the committee votes on those dates. I mean, that's done by a formula, which does not change. Now, certainly there are situations where it can. I don't know if any of you have had to adjust your dates for COVID, but we've extended some of our deadlines where we usually would not. But that is the rare exception. So, you know, for us, for the most part, once our dates are set, they're set. Other questions? Feel free to email me if you have any or would like to see the spreadsheets, and I'd be happy to respond. Thank you all for taking the time this morning. Certainly do appreciate it.